Our breaking news, Monday night massacre. President Donald Trump fires the acting attorney general for refusing to enforce his travel ban. Back with me now, Alan Dershowitz, Fareed Zakaria, Timothy Naftali, Carl Bernstein, Jeffrey Lord, and David Gergen. So Carl, my question to you is, what does all of this mean for the Senate confirmation of Jeff Sessions? How big of a battle is this going to be now?
Well, I think that both Republicans and Democrats at this point will want to bring him back for further questioning. And that could endanger him, because I'm told that Sessions, along with Bannon, is the author of this policy, of this executive order, along with the president, of course, but that Sessions has a real role in this. But I think there's a bigger point to be made here, and that is that this executive order and chaos resulted not because of an imminent national security threat, but a political statement. That is what Bannon, that is what Trump, that is what Sessions intended here, was a political statement at the expense of our genuine national security and the expense of our genuine history and democratic principles. So what's happening here? That yes, Trump's followers, they will stay with him, certainly for a while on this, but instead of building up his credibility as president and his legitimacy, he's undermining his own legitimacy. He keeps talking about how his legitimacy is being questioned by the press or by Hillary Clinton or by some other unnamed forces. He has undermined in 1 week his own legitimacy to the point where there are many Republicans on Capitol Hill who question his competence. That is the worst thing he could have in terms of his legitimacy, and there are people who don't see him as legitimate at this point because of it.
Can I make a point about history for one moment? Everybody's talking about the great American history. Let's understand how bad American history is on this issue. We had the Chinese Exclusion Act. Under President Wilson, we excluded people from all over the world, country by country. In the 1930s, we excluded Jews. Sure, we've gotten better over the years, but the American history is not a history of the Statue of Liberty with its wonderful poem. It's a history of bigotry and bias against people based on countries. We've done better than that. This is a terrible policy, but it's part of the historical policy of America of being racist in the way we select people for who we admit into this country.
And we've had racism, Alan, but in fact we've overcome it.
That's
and
right.
That's the point.
But don't talk about the history, though. The history is a very mixed history.
We've had that history, Alan, but we have overcome it time and again, and what has prevailed are Donald Trump's parents coming here, your grandparents, my grandparents, that what has prevailed is not what you're talking about.
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, but for many years that did prevail. My parents and grandparents came before that. In the 50s and 60s, we kept out communists. You know, we have a lot of work to do in overcoming our terrible history of racism. And we've done a good job in the past few years.
We learned a long time ago never to interrupt a Harvard professor.
Let's not talk about history.
Go ahead.
Let's not talk about history.
And we had slavery. I mean, this is cold comfort to say we did terrible things in the past. So hey, this is all right. And as far as I understand, Alan, just a second, the most recent law of any import on this subject is the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Law, which specifically prohibits the government from discriminating on the basis of national origin. You also have the First Amendment that explicitly prohibits the United States from discriminating on the basis of religion. At the very least, a federal judge believed that these were two powerful enough reasons to stay the implementation of this policy. The fact that we have done bad things in the past does not, provide a carte blanche to any administration. If some administration were to say, well, we did something like this in 1820, it doesn't really mean that we have moved on. And I think that I'm not missing your point, Alan. The fact that we had done bad things in the past is not license to do bad things in the future.
I didn't say that, and you know that. What I said is don't cite the history. Talk about the present, talk about what we overcame, but don't rely on the American tradition of welcoming immigrants. It's a false historical argument.
Fine. We were talking about whether this president is competent. And I think Professor Dershowitz made a very interesting point in the sense that a competent president would not sign this executive order on the same day that we were commemorating the Holocaust. Because a competent president would understand the tension between the history of not bringing in refugees, as America should have done in the 1930s, and what this particular this executive order represents. So a competent president who understood the policy of the moment would not have rolled it out this way. A competent president would have waited for his own attorney general to be confirmed, to have a team prepared to defend this. I don't think it's defensible, but to defend this. That's what a competent president who understood how to run a large organization would have acted. That's why the issue of competence is...
You're talking about
the rush? What was the rush?
What's the rush? Well, I think, surely from the president's point of view, this was an act of insubordination, and he wasn't going to tolerate it.
What's the rush to do the travel ban now?
Oh well, I feel that he feels that this with the whole string of other things he feels were campaign promises, and that he wanted to demonstrate action immediately.
He's got 4 years.
I understand, but and then the 4-year thing is a little elusive here, because what happens is presidents are at their most powerful, if you will, in the beginning of their term. If they get it renewed, then that plays out again. But it's like watching sand down.
I'm just asking you because listen, I'm not going to speak to his competency or not. That's not my role here. But to avoid some of the chaos and some of the misunderstanding surrounding this, it would seem from most people's view, again, from even Republicans in Washington, that it could have been handled better, could have waited, could have crossed the T's and dotted the I's before rolling it out, because, as they say, first impressions are very important, right?
Right. I think that there's two perceptions here. There's the Washington establishment impression, and there's an impression out there. And I would, one president comes to mind, and you'll be shocked, it's not Ronald Reagan, although firing the air traffic controllers. Hang on.
Andrew
Jackson is often compared.
Does not get him reelected or garner him support. The people who are out there, that gets him reelected.
But my point is, he is sometimes compared recently to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson took on the Bank of the United States. In other words, the establishment of his day, and went full tilt against them. I think that that's the kind of thing that you're seeing here, and that this is part of it.
Why it appears
because he wanted a string of things to indicate that he was taking action on his campaign promises immediately.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
I just want to make a couple of points. I want to disagree with my good friend Jeffrey Lord. Like, there are two different Americas. There's a Washington America, and the America outside Washington is very supportive of this. You cannot look at the demonstrations that have broken out spontaneously around the country in huge numbers and say that America is happy. It just is not. Let's acknowledge that his followers are for him and continue to be for him, and they welcome this. But there are millions of other Americans who tonight think they've got the worst president on their hands in their lifetimes and aren't sure what to do about it. Let me just go make one other point. I think from our point of view, yes, I think that this looks like incompetence, but these are very smart people, and I think there is a lot of evidence they intend to have this kind of chaos, that they enjoy this, that they want to go after the press because they like to do that, and that he sees himself as a disruptor, and Bannon is in there, and we know his influence is growing, and I don't know, it was an interesting point that Carl Bernstein made about Jeff Sessions joining in this. I'd like to know more about that, because that would affect, I think, his confirmation. But I think they intentionally want to create this kind of chaos, this kind of anger, and this is what they think will work for them in their long-term strategy to change America.
Well, it's according to a report that we have, Jeff Sessions did not have any role in the rollout of this particular ban. And the point that you were making...
That's helpful. Though.
Yeah, but the point you were making, David, regarding the chaos and was this plan, Fareed Zakaria and I spoke about this earlier. That was one of my first questions to you, correct, about that? And you said...
No, look, I think nobody could possibly want what has happened right now. I think that it's true they want to disrupt. I think it's true they want to send a signal to the career bureaucracy. But you could not possibly want to have the kind of colossal chaos that you have here, with your own orders not being implemented, with judges staying it, with protests in airports. And David Gergen made a very important point that it's important to remember. This policy is already having massive negative repercussions around the world. Take what has happened in Iraq today. The Iraqi parliament has essentially passed a resolution saying, look, we have fought with the United States for a decade now. Our troops are fighting ISIS every day. We have Americans assisting us in that effort. We are, in effect, partnering with you to destroy ISIS. And you're telling us that those Iraqis who are putting their lives on the line for an American foreign policy objective, which also serves their objectives, those people are your enemies to such an extent they cannot even
that's
set
what
foot
President
in the
Obama
United
said, right?
States.
That's what President Obama said. He banned them for 6 months.
No, he didn't.
Right? I mean, he stopped the
Yes, but Fareed,
There's a difference. There's a difference. The difference is, and I have it
Yeah,
right here,
Fareed.
the Obama administration's travel restriction provided extra scrutiny to people who traveled to these 7 countries, Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Syria, Somalia, Libya, and Yemen, because they are hotbeds for foreign fighters. It is the other way around. The administration said
But there was an Iraqi that came in here, and they found the FBI later found out after he was in here,
It did not
an
ban people
IED.
from entering the U.S. just because they were citizens from these 7 countries.
It is also a strange defense of Trump administration policy, Jeffrey, for you to say, we're just doing what President Obama did. I didn't realize. I mean, talk about whining.
That's very strange. Listen, I think we can't overlook this. I mean, we're 10 days into this administration, everyone, and so this controversial ban, which is, we saw protests. We saw people all over this country protesting this, and then tonight, he fires the acting attorney general comes out and says, I can't support this. He fires the acting attorney general. He has now appointed a new acting attorney general, and then his permanent attorney general, his pick, has not been confirmed by the Congress. By the Congress, I mean the Senate being part of that.
So far, Donald Trump is running America the way he ran his casinos in Atlantic City. I worry about whether the outcome will be the same.
And also, we are hearing tonight that Donald Trump had replaced the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're going to bring you the latest on that when we come back with much more. And also coming up, why Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner may find Washington a tougher place than they realized.